The movie begins in the office of a man named Eduardo, who is engrossed in his work. Suddenly, his assistant Anna rushes in and hands him a stack of documents. She informs him that their chairman, Maximiliano, has urgently ordered them to evaluate a property called Valdemar Mansion for an upcoming auction. Eduardo is annoyed upon hearing this, as the last appraiser, Pablo, mysteriously disappeared after visiting the mansion. They suspect that he may have stolen some antique items and fled, but since they cannot disobey the chairman, Eduardo decides to contact another employee, Luisa, who is currently on leave. The scene then cuts to Luisa's house, where she is relaxing, when suddenly the doorbell rings. When she opens the door, she's met by a delivery boy, who hands her a bouquet and some documents. Luisa takes the items, and upon opening the documents, discovers that they contain information about Valdemar Mansion. Enraged, she immediately calls Eduardo and scolds him for assigning her work while she's on extended leave. Luisa initially refuses to go for the evaluation, but after a lot of persuasion from Eduardo, she eventually agrees. The next day, Luisa arrives at the Valdemar Mansion and is greeted by a gardener named Santiago. After exchanging introductions, he gives her a brief overview of the place and warns her to be careful inside. Santiago also requests that she see him before leaving, mentioning that most appraisers leave without saying goodbye. Next, Luisa moves forward and comes across the grave of Leonor Valdemar, the house's former owner. She then enters the building and realizes that it is in a state of disarray. Luisa begins to appraise the items and take photos, and without even realizing it, she captures a spirit through the camera lens. Engrossed in evaluating the antique objects, she also fails to notice a mysterious mummy-like figure silently entering the room. Soon after, Luisa discovers a staircase and follows it until she arrives at the attic. Once up there, she smells a foul odor and starts to trace its source. Luisa eventually comes across a stretcher covered in plastic. When she removes the cover, she's horrified to discover that it is the corpse of none other than the former appraiser, Pablo. At this moment, the mysterious figure also emerges from a corner and proceeds to attack her, but Luisa notices it in the nick of time and runs for her life. She soon finds an old trunk in a room and hides inside to protect herself. It appears to work, and Luisa breathes a sigh of relief. That is, until her phone suddenly begins ringing. This alerts the creature to her position, and it quickly opens the trunk to attack her. Fortunately, Luisa dodges and starts running down the stairs. While looking for weapons, she enters the kitchen, where Santiago notices her from outside. He seems to realize what's happening and directs her to a wooden shed. Following his instructions, Luisa makes her way to the shed and climbs the stacked logs. Santiago then opens a locked window and helps her climb out to safety. After they finally escape the house, a man named Damaso arrives with a car and allows the two to enter. Luisa soon falls unconscious, so a worried Santiago tries to wake her up. However, Damaso becomes annoyed and scolds him for allowing the woman to enter the mansion in the first place. In the next scene, we meet a private detective named Nicholas, who has just exited an airport. He dials a number on his phone, and while he waits for an answer, a car pulls up nearby. Nicholas enters the car and meets Maximiliano, the chairman of the company where Luisa works. It turns out that she has been missing for 4 days, ever since she went to the mansion. Therefore, Maximiliano has hired Nicholas to find her as soon as possible. He also asks the detective to work discreetly, without letting any journalists or police know. Shortly after, Maximiliano drops Nicholas off at a station, where he will board a train bound for the Valdemar Mansion. The detective then enters the train and meets a woman named Dr. Nora, who is the president of the Valdemar Foundation. It is revealed that she has also been hired by Maximiliano to help with the investigation. After a brief conversation, she begins to tell Nicholas the history of the mansion, based on the detailed journal of the former owners. The scene then cuts to the 19th century, where we meet a couple named Lazaro and Leonor Valdemar, who live in the mansion. It turns out Leonor runs a private orphanage, and Lazaro is a photographer. They seem content with their life together. However, things take a turn when Lazaro gains access to high society. The couple then starts a scam by generating fake photos of wealthy people with the supposed spirits of their deceased loved ones. Lazaro experiments with techniques like diffusion and creates images that seem to look like ghostly figures. As a result, they eventually become very wealthy, and the only thing missing in their lives is a child. We then get to know that Leonor has been advised by doctors not to get pregnant, but she is determined to try at all costs. One day, things change dramatically when a journalist named Garbia realizes the ruse behind Lazaro's phony supernatural supernatural contacts. He thus visits them and threatens to expose them unless they agree to pay him a hefty percentage of their earnings. The couple argues that they have used all their money for the betterment of orphaned children, but the journalist doesn't care when he continues to blackmail them. An enraged Lazaro rejects his demands and kicks him out of the house. In the aftermath of this incident, Garbia writes a news article exposing the couple's fraud. This leads to Lazaro's arrest, leaving Leonor in charge of the orphanage. She also faces severe adversity because of the scam. Despite the challenges, Leonor holds on to her unwavering hope, waiting for her husband's return. However, things take a darker turn when her butler arrives with bad news from prison one day. It turns out that Lazaro won't be released until the trial, and he's not being given the medication he must take daily for his weak liver. The next day, Leonor breaks into an exclusive gentleman's club where the prison director is having lunch with Garbia. She demands answers about the treatment of her husband, emphasizing how crucial the medication is for his survival. However, the prison director dismisses her very casually. He instead tells her to pursue the case through official channels. Upon hearing this, Leonor is heartbroken as she knows it will take too long, but she has no choice but to agree. As Leonor leaves, a newspaper catches her attention. It has a slanderous article about her orphanage on the front page. This enrages her so much that she storms up to Garbia and slaps him. Meanwhile, a bald man named Alistair Crowley, who had witnessed the entire altercation, becomes intrigued by her case. In the following scene, Alistair visits Lazaro in prison while pretending to be his lawyer. When they finally meet, he confesses to being a great admirer of Lazaro's work and promises to help him get out. Lazaro is doubtful of the strange man, but given his dire situation, he has no choice but to trust him. He then reveals that Garbia has been able to secure a woman as a witness who has promised to expose his fraud during the trial. Lazaro has no idea who the woman is, but it is because of her that he's still not being released. Following this, Alistair devises a daring plan and sends a prostitute to seduce Garbia. She immediately gets to work and gets the journalist extremely drunk. After he passes out, she presses his apartment key into a lump of clay to create a duplicate. Days later, when Garbia returns home from work, he's surprised to see a large crowd gathered outside. It turns out that a woman has been screaming from inside, and the neighbors even called the police. When they open the door, they find the same prostitute inside, bound at the hands and crying. The woman tearfully reveals how Garbia had been holding her hostage for days. She reveals how he had been forcing her to testify against Lazaro and threatening to kill her if she didn't comply. In the aftermath of this incident, Garbia is arrested while Lazaro is hailed as a hero and released from prison. On his way back to the mansion, he asks his butler where Leonor is and why she didn't come today. The butler reveals that she's now pregnant and can't travel in her condition, which fills Lazaro with happiness. Soon after, he arrives home and finds his wife playing with the children of the orphanage. The couple then joyfully hugs each other and begins kissing after such a long time apart. However, their happiness is short-lived when Leonor suddenly begins experiencing severe belly pain. A doctor is then called, and after some checkups, he delivers shocking news. Leonor has lost the child and will never be able to conceive again. This hits the couple hard, especially Leonor, who mourns her unborn child and falls into a deep depression. Days later, as she is beginning to recover emotionally, she receives a visit from a friend. On the same day, Alistair also appears outside the mansion to meet Lazaro. Leonor looks at him through the window, and her friend says that she has heard he's the man who helped Lazaro's release from prison. She also reveals that Alistair is rumored to be a magician and has been expelled from several places due to his dark witchcraft practices. Therefore, she warns Leonor not to let her husband get close to him, as he seems very dangerous. On the other hand, Alistair approaches Lazaro, who is delighted to see him. The latter then expresses gratitude for his help and wishes he could repay the favor. In response, Alistair reveals that there is something Lazaro can do to pay him back. He then shows him photos of the wealthy people Lazaro had photographed, and it turns out that some of them indeed captured spirits. Lazaro was so focused on performing his tricks and making money that he had never noticed this before. Alistair believes Lazaro is truly the link and requests his help in carrying out his ambitious plan to connect the real world with the afterlife. To persuade him, Alistair claims to know an incantation that could cure Leonor's infertility, but he explains that this would require performing a complex ritual during the upcoming total lunar eclipse, which which is happening after 86 years. Lazaro is a bit skeptical, but since the bald man has only helped him so far, he decides to trust him once again. In the evening, Lazaro informs his wife about Alistair and the ritual they're going to perform on Saturday, but this only enrages her, as they had planned to take several children to meet their adoptive parents on that day. She also expresses her distrust of the strange man and asks her husband to stay away from him. The scene then cuts to the evening of the eclipse, where Leonor takes some of the orphanage kids and heads to the train station to meet the adoptive parents. As they leave, Alistair, accompanied by his peculiar band of gothic followers, arrives at the Valdemar Mansion. Together with Lazaro, they decide to perform the occult ritual in Leonor's absence. Alistair gathers everyone in a circle and reveals that each of them wants something: business success, inspiration, knowledge, or wealth. He writes each of their requests on a scroll and prepares the setting for the ceremony. The ritual then begins, and Alistair instructs one of his followers to remove the crucifix she has been wearing around her neck. Soon enough, the scroll floats into the air, and a portal to another world opens. However, things don't go as planned, as Lazaro suddenly starts feeling ill. To their shock, the dark portal releases an evil entity that ignites fire and begins attacking them. Lazaro suddenly faints, and one of Alistair's followers is engulfed in flames. The fire also quickly begins spreading through the mansion, intensifying the panic. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Alistair hurriedly flees the scene with the surviving followers. By this time, Lazaro is severely injured, and blood is pouring from his wounds. So, his servants rush to help him. Meanwhile, the situation reaches Leonor's ears, and she immediately rushes back to the house. While Alistair is escaping, one of his followers questions him about the creature that was released. The bald man responds in a trembling voice that it is called a devourer, one of the most terrifying and malevolent entities in the dark world. In another scene, the devourer ventures into the cemetery and brings one of the deceased back to life with its power. Just then, Leonor returns to the mansion, where the firemen have just finished putting out the fire. She soon finds her husband unconscious and bleeding on the floor. Worried and shocked, Leonor orders her butler to retrieve some medicine, so he heads to the kitchen. But to his horror, he finds the newly resurrected zombie devouring a maid. The poor butler tries to flee, but the creature catches up to him and kills him as well. Moments later, Lazaro begins to regain his senses, and Leonor tries to help him get up. However, the creature soon shows up there and proceeds to attack them. Lazaro then confronts the demon to protect his loved one, but the confrontation does not go as expected, and the creature pins him against the wall, nearly killing him. At this intense moment, Leonor screams at the top of her lungs and unexpectedly begins speaking in a foreign language. This finally prompts the creature to stop, as it seems to understand what she's saying. It then unexpectedly calms down and walks away from there. Once the danger is past, Lazaro and Leonor have a conversation, and the truth is finally revealed. It turns out that Leonor was the link all along, not her husband, and she can communicate with spirits. She then reveals that she has just made a pact to sacrifice herself to the demon in exchange for her husband's safety. Upon hearing this, Lazaro is distraught and begs her not to go through with it. However, Leonor decides to fulfill the pact and kisses her husband a final goodbye. She then descends into the portal where the malevolent demons reside and unalives herself. In the end, only Leonor's corpse is left behind, while her soul has already departed. A devastated Lazaro does everything he can to bring his wife back, but to no avail. With no other choice, he carries her lifeless body outside and buries it in their garden. In the final scene, we return to the present, where Nora finishes telling this tragic story to Nicholas. The detective is made visibly emotional by the tale of a once happy couple who were torn apart by dark forces. However, Nora urges him not to dwell on the past and reminds him that they must not forget their main mission, which is to find Louisa.